The trope of a horror movie pop star has a decade-spanning history, but with many recent instances including Skye Riley from Smile 2, Lady Raven from Trap, and Nyjah from Swarm, the trope certainly has risen in popularity over the last couple of years. As more of these horror movie pop stars debut, it becomes easier to start drawing parallels and making thematic connections between all of these stars and their stories. Skye Riley, Lady Raven, Mima Kirigoe from Perfect Blue, Ashley O from Black Mirror. These horror movie pop stars have more in common than meets the eye, and they all help us to define this burgeoning horror archetype. All 4 projects deal with the life, relationship, and identity-altering consequences of having fame, the dangers of obsessive fandom, as well as the forces that tirelessly work to control the decisions and actions of these stars. Before I continue, I will be spoiling the plots of these 5 projects on the screen right now, so if they are on your watch list and you don't wish to know things like who the killer is or anything like that, go ahead and leave this video and come back once you're in the know. In these horror films, fame is commonly depicted as life-altering, having the capacity to change your relationships and even drastically warp your own identity. In Smile 2, like many real-life stars, fictional pop star Skye Riley has a drug problem, and following a publicized spiral, her management team is eager to get back in business, and they push Skye back out to the public during a demanding comeback tour. To make matters worse, she's also just been infected with the Smile Demon, or as he's called in-universe, the Entity. This means that over the course of the next week, her entire life will be destroyed with visions of her worst fears. Similar to how Skye Riley was forced into a career move to avoid the loss of her fame, in Perfect Blue, Mima Kirigoe leaves the girl group that brought her her fame because of societal pressure that her window of success as a pop idol would only wane as time went on. So Mima herself chooses a career pivot towards acting, a more mature and stable career path, but also a path that comes with new threats to not only her image, but also her well-being. Trying to break away from that youthful image of her past, Mima works with an exploitative photographer who takes racy photos of her, and in her first acting gig, she is made to do a very graphic scene of sexual assault that proves to be deeply traumatic. This trauma wreaks havoc on Mima's mental state and causes her to question her own identity. Fame is depicted as having similarly dark consequences in the Black Mirror episode entitled Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2, where we are introduced to Ashley O, a pop star with a highly manufactured persona, who, because of her fame, is extremely isolated and vulnerable to abuse by those around her. In most of these films, fame is depicted as something that draws darkness towards the stars in various ways, but 2024's Trap paints a less black and white picture of what it's like to be famous. For starters, Lady Raven's fame does put her in harm's way just like the others, as it is what leads her to being an integral piece to a poorly planned FBI operation that culminates in her being kidnapped by a serial killer. However, later on in the film, Lady Raven's fame is used as a shield and a lifeline against that exact serial killer. All of these pop stars deal with the consequences of fame throughout their stories in different ways, but one common consequence that comes with all of their fame is obsessive fandom. Perfect Blue has a character named Uchida, an obsessive fan with a parasocial relationship with Mima. Uchida stalks her, and the audience is led to believe that he is behind her death threats and the murders that have started to unfold. Throughout the film, we also get a glimpse at a fan website dedicated to Mima that tracks her every move and even criticizes her shift away from the pop idol lifestyle. But Uchida himself ends up murdered, proving that he's not the killer nor the person tracking her every move. But his actions were still deeply damaging to Mima, as are the countless other people that follow her around various events and partake in that toxic website. In the Black Mirror episode, we spend a lot of time with Rachel, a fan of Ashley's who only becomes more obsessed after the death of her own mother and the introduction of an Ashley-themed AI doll into her life. A common thread with these films and how they depict the obsessive fan is that they are socially awkward, sometimes even having physical abnormalities. And another common thread between the obsessive fans is that they are more often than not dealing with their own trauma, like the death of a loved one. One horror project that features a pop star character that I haven't talked about yet is the 2023 miniseries Swarm, which, unlike these other examples I've focused on, actually focuses on the obsessive fan character and never really gets into the perspective of the pop star herself. So naturally, Swarm doesn't have a lot to say about how fame changes Nyjah, the pop star, but of course it does have a ton to say about the dangers of fandom. Swarm centers on Dre, a young woman who is a huge fan of Nyjah, a blatantly obvious pastiche of Beyonce. One night, Nyjah surprise drops an album, but this is also the night that Dre's sister takes her own life. Right off the bat, there's a parallel between Dre and Rachel, as both of their adoration for their respective idols gets pushed towards the realm of obsession after the death of a loved one. These heightened emotions are too much for Dre, and she ends up murdering her sister's ex-boyfriend after he speaks ill of Nyjah, the star that both Dre and her sister grew up adoring. The miniseries that follows documents Dre's dive into serial killing, targeting people who diss Nyjah either online or in real conversation, all while she travels the country trying to meet her idol. Like Uchida in Perfect Blue, Dre abandons the life that she once had and devotes nearly her entire self to her love of her favorite musician, and in both cases, this devotion leads to their own destruction. Just like how fame has the potential to destroy the star too has the potential to destroy the fan. While Swarm is hyper-focused on the fan, Smile 2 is pretty focused on Skye Riley, the star, so in my opinion the film doesn't have too much to say about fandom. However, there are a couple notable exceptions. For one, during a meet and greet, Skye encounters the obsessive fan trope to a T, complete with social awkwardness, very similar to both Uchida, Dre, and less so Rachel. This very scene is soon hijacked by the entity, who appears to Skye as an eager little girl with that trademark smile. This is one of the only scenes that shows us how her fans affect her, and just like Mima, it seems like her fans are attached to the idea of her, but they don't actually give a damn about her well-being. And given the situation that Skye is in, being forced into a comeback tour while being possessed by a demon, Skye's fans are just another source of fear and anxiety to her that are pushing her back into the spotlight. At the end of Smile 2, Skye Riley fully succumbs to the control of the entity while on stage, and while possessed, she offs herself in front of a sold-out crowd, which within the lore of these movies most likely means that the entity will put all of these concert goers through the same week of self-destruction that Skye and her predecessors have died from. This ending can be interpreted in a bunch of different ways, but to me, both of the Smile films seem to be loosely focused on the themes of addiction and abusive mother-daughter relationships. Like the first Smile, a lot of drama comes from that toxic relationship our protagonist has with her mother, but it's in rare moments like the meet and greet scene and the ending that Skye's fans can be seen as complicit in the same evils that Skye's mother is also guilty of. Despite her public drug-induced spiral, Skye's fans, just like her own mother, were demanding she return to the stage, and now thanks to the entity, all of them are paying the ultimate price. Both Trap and Black Mirror have slightly different perspectives on the obsessive fan, and both projects at times see the stars as the ones using the fans more than the other way around. In Trap, Lady Raven live streams to her fans in order to locate and rescue one of the killer's victims, and she later commands a swarm of her fans to chase after the killer. Both are instances where the pop star is using her parasocial relationship with her fans for her own gain, even though the fans' own lives are at risk. And in Black Mirror, just like Lady Raven does, Ashley too calls upon Rachel to save her life, once again even though Rachel's own life is at risk. For our horror movie pop stars, fame changes their relationships, and being perceived by the passionate masses messes with their minds, and both of those things leave them vulnerable to destructive levels of manipulation and control. In Perfect Blue, we first follow the red herring that perhaps Uchida, the obsessive fan, is behind the murders. Then, as Mima's own mental state deteriorates, both Mima and the audience start to think that Mima herself could be behind it all, cracking from the pressure of her fame and her career pivot. But the end of the film reveals that it wasn't Mima either, and it was actually her manager Rumi, who herself has a past life as an idol. Like Mima's fans, Rumi couldn't cope with Mima leaving her idol life behind, especially when it meant a very harsh transition from a world that is youthful and bright to one that's mature and cruel. To protect that image of idol Mima, Rumi inadvertently creates a separate identity where she is idol Mima, and it is through that personality that Rumi has been running Mima's stalkerish fan site and committing all of these murders. Throughout the film, Mima is constantly being controlled. Even a choice that was her own, to pivot her career from music to acting, was ultimately influenced by the pressures of society. And when this choice upsets her fanbase and her manager, both parties proceed to drive Mima to the brink of insanity. Ashley O from Black Mirror, as well, is constantly being controlled. Her Aunt Catherine drugs her. Her career decisions are not her own, but her aunt's. And when Ashley defies her aunt, she forces Ashley into a coma. But even with her entire life stripped away from Ashley, Aunt Catherine still needed more from her, and she found a way to extract songs from her comatose subconsciousness. Just like Ashley has an abusive auntager, Skye Riley, of course, has an abusive momager, who, as we know, pushes Skye to go forward with the tour despite injury and Skye's rapidly worsening mental state. And although his actions are certainly unintentional, Lady Raven too has a family member on her team that puts her in harm's way, as it is Lady Raven's uncle, played by Shyamalan himself, that gives the killer access backstage, which then results in Lady Raven essentially being kidnapped. Both Smile 2 and the Ashley O Black Mirror episode feel like they're specifically drawing from some real-life pop stars and their experiences, and how the idea of a celebrity being manipulated by people who don't truly have their best interests and view them not as human but as a machine is actually more common than us fans may expect. In Smile 2, Trap, Black Mirror, and Perfect Blue, the trope of the horror pop star can be defined by their fame, leading to them having a false sense of their own identity, being subject to the dangers of obsessive fandom, and being manipulated and controlled by unforeseen forces that threaten their lives. Pop music and horror films are truly two of my favorite topics to speak about, so when I saw that 2 horror films centered on pop stars were releasing last year, I knew I'd end up speaking about them eventually, and I hope you guys enjoyed dissecting some of the similarities and differences between these 4.5 pop stars. Who are your favorite horror movie pop stars? Which ones did I miss? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you next time.